So I was working on a project that sounded like this. And I really loved the synths, but the drums weren't really doing it for me, so I decided I'd need a different approach for the drums. I had been listening to James Blake's new album where the drums sound a bit like this. So I decided I would take some inspiration from that and program some drums that ended up sounding a bit like this. So I'd like to talk you through the thought process and share two concepts that are fundamental to creating some kind of beat like this. Concept number one is groove, but specifically how groove is implemented in something like Ableton, where it's actually swing plus velocity variations. I'll explain that in a second. And the second one is a sound design pattern, which I'm going to call UDU, which is utility, delay, utility. I'll explain what that means in a second as well. All right, let's talk about groove and specifically the way in which Ableton uses the word groove, because it is a bit of a fluid word that can be used for a lot of different things. But specifically, what we're going to be talking about here is swing, which is the phenomenon where you push every second note back a little bit to create a kind of a kind of a feeling rather than the machine gun like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And so you can push every second note back to varying degrees. And then we also add in velocity variations for various steps. So some grooves might accent the downbeat, some grooves might accent the upbeat, some grooves might accent every 3/16th note. There's a lot of possibilities there. But if you choose a certain amount of swing and a certain amount of velocity variation, the same drum loop can sound drastically different in different circumstances. So how would you experiment with that? So funnily enough, I don't teach this often because I don't use this often, because the type of techno that I often make is very straight. It's very on the grid and I program in the velocity variations myself. But in this James Blake song, it's an essential part of how it's set up. So let's look at how you might implement it. So what I would recommend doing is I would recommend taking a drum rack, doesn't really matter which one because the sound design comes later, and programming in a beat that loosely resembles what you're going to make, but that's very dense. In fact, try to make something play every 16th note. Just fill up the grid with a bunch of stuff so that when you apply a groove, you really hear the impact of the groove. And then you can go shopping around for different grooves, play with the intensity of the timing and the velocity changes in the groove pool, and then find a groove that works for you. And then from there, you can remove elements and make it sparser again, but then you'll know that when your elements hit, they'll all have this kind of coherent groove to them. It's also worth noting that in a lot of dance music, the fundamental building block, the rhythmical building block of most rhythms is the 16th note. So when you're shopping for grooves, have a look at the groove name to see if it says 16th note or 8th note or 32nd note. Usually those with 16 will yield the best results. By all means, go have fun and experiment with all the other ones. But in terms of timing, those with the number 16 in the top are going to yield the best results. Here, let me show you that in practice. Okay, so imagine you make yourself a little MIDI track here. It's a fresh, empty MIDI track, and we're going to put on some kind of drum kit. I always like putting on the 909 because it's a very known quantity. So just a stock sound. The idea is that we're going to replace all the sounds with other sounds later on. We do Command-Shift-M to make ourselves a new MIDI clip. We can make the MIDI clip 1 bar because 1 bar is sort of the unit that we're going to be working with. And probably let's put a kick drum on every downbeat because that's where I'm probably going to end up. Probably with some kind of snare or clap on the backbeats. And then, and this is the crucial one, you want to fill up all the 16th notes so that you can appreciate what the groove is doing to each 16th note. So let's put rim shots. Heck, and let's also put hi-hats. Okay, so this is a drum loop with no velocity variation and no swing applied to it, right? We could do it by hand, for example, by pushing every second note back a little bit. See, this is swing. And the amount at which we push it back is the amount of swing. Gives a very different feeling. And when you just put it straight up like this with no swing, it sounds very like a machine gun. Da 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 da, right? Okay, and so if you want to add a groove to this, all you have to go here is to the word groove on the left and hit this little hot swap button. And that's going to open something called the groove pool. And here in the groove pool, you can go looking for something that suits you. And for example, here's one that says 16ths, right? That's the one that I'm looking for because the core unit of my groove is 16 notes. You could do the same with 8 notes if your core groove really revolves around the 8 notes. Very often mine revolve around the 16 notes. And so there's different flavors of them, and so you can audition them in the sense that you can drag this down onto your clip and just hit play. And now invisibly behind the scenes, some swing and some velocity variations have been applied. These all have very different feelings to them. That's a very intense one. This is a more mild one. All right, I like this. You see? This flows. And so I could say, okay, I'm going to commit to this one. Or what I could also do is, I could try messing around with the timing and velocity amounts here by increasing the timing or decreasing the timing to find the Goldilocks middle point where I feel like it's adding something, some humanization, some human element to it. This is very exaggerated, right? This is a bit too exaggerated. So there we go. Put it around 30. Sounds good. And so now we can, of course, make things more sparse. We can take away all those hi-hats. We can take away all those 16th notes and simply program some other pattern. And now that has that groove behind it. And if you want to see what the groove is doing exactly, you can just hit this little arrow, hop, which applies the groove to the MIDI. So now there's no more invisible force working behind the MIDI notes. You can see exactly what the velocity variations have done and what the timing variations have done. Let's go back. Let's do Command Z to undo and leave everything clean on the grid. And now, if I like this as a groove, I can go in and start replacing all the individual sounds. And that's something that I did in my little proof of concept here. So on the backbeat, you've got that like pitch down wooden block, kind of very burial-like sound. I also allowed myself to program things a bit off the grid. And then added in some shakers. 2 layers of shakers. One accenting the upbeat, one accenting sort of the shuffles in between. And then I added in a layer which I'm going to call, what did I call it? The UDU. Here I called it the delay trick. That's that. And what is that? It's like a kind of a distorted drum sound, right? Well, that brings us to the second part of the tutorial, and that's this particular design pattern that I want you to understand, which is a utility, a delay, and a utility. And in this case, I've used the third-party plugins LFO tool instead of utility and Portal instead of a delay, but they do the exact same thing. I'm going to repeat this concept using only stock plugins. But the concept is that you put a drum pattern into an extreme amount of delay to really mess up and mess with the sound, to find some ways where the timbre really gets messed up in a very sort of attractive way. But when you do that, the fact that you have to push the delay to a pretty extreme setting is probably going to be a bit overwhelming. So instead we put a utility before and after the unit. The one before is going to allow us to send only little slices of the drum loop into the delay. Then the delay is going to do this crazy whirly feedback nonsense to it. And then we're going to use the second utility to only splice in a little slice of that audio again into our drum loop where we want it to actually arrive. So utility, delay, utility. Here, let me remove the one that I did and start one from fresh. So what we've got here is this drum pattern has the swing that I wanted. So it's got a groove, right? And it's playing a lot of the 16th notes. And in itself, it's super harsh, it's super annoying, right? So we're going to want to do a few things to it. We're going to want to put a utility, an extreme delay. Let's find some kind of setting from echo. I don't know, let's do the licorice whip. I don't know what that is. And then another utility. Let's see what this does without using the utilities, just putting it straight into this delay. This is not nearly extreme enough. I want it to be extremely messed up. Ah, here, this is cool. Yeah, cool. All right. This is way too extreme, right? As a sound. In our drum loop, it doesn't sound like anything, right? So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna choose which slice goes in there. And so what I can do is, I can select my clip, right click on this utility going in there, and do show modulation. And then in the modulation, I do Command B to draw, and I can take it all the way down. Nothing is being sent in now. So let's be more prudent with which notes go in. Yeah, there we go. That's cool. Now realize you can stack several delays here if you want. I kind of feel like it. I'm gonna do that right now. Okay, and so now we've got a lot of elements that maybe work in the drum loop. Cool, it kind of works, but it's quite sloppy, right? And maybe I don't want it to be this sloppy. And so that's what the second utility is for. So we've got our 2 delays and then our utility. And in that second utility, I'm going to do the exact same thing, show modulation, bring it all down, and then just find places where it sounds good. Yeah, cool. Now we've created something that could serve as a layer. We could resample this, of course, and then sprinkle that into taste, create more variations on it. But so this design pattern's pretty universal. A utility, something that really mess up the sound, and then another utility. And so cool, that's 2 ideas that I'm gonna pursue further to complete this drum loop and hopefully bring this track further. These wonderful synths were made by my friend Anton, my partner in Face the Sun. By the way, if you're looking for music coaching, he is available. So find his details below and set up a meeting with him because I highly recommend. I hope this has given you some ideas on workflows to liven up your drums. Come show us on the Discord channel what you did with this. If you want to learn from me in a more structured context, follow my Foundations course. And until next time, stay producing, be good to each other, and take care. Bye-bye.